I'm Dylan Radigan. I've interviewed nearly every CEO and most world leaders during the past 25 years. And now I'm bootstrapping. I'm turning my attention to the new CEOs and the irrepressible entrepreneurs leading the next generation of innovation in the world. Welcome back to Tasty Live. I am Dylan Radigan. Time for another episode of Bootstrapping Ben Waitley. Our guest, his company, Memrise. It is a language learning platform with more than 65 million users across 189 countries. Clearly, Ben, somebody thinks what you've invented, and more than somebody, 65 million somebody thinks that what you have invented and are offering is effective to help people learn new languages. What do you think that you have done differently from other people that offer language instruction?
Thanks, Tom. So interesting question. I think the core of this is that the reason that we set out Memrise, the reason that I decided that it was worth bringing a language learning app into the world, and there were already many at the time, was that so my experience learning languages myself at school was that I could do well in exams, but then whenever I went to France or Spain, I couldn't speak a word. I'd hold up my exam certificate, I got an A. Yeah, but I still can't order a coffee. And it turned out lots of people shared that experience as well. I went on to study neuroscience at Oxford, and particularly got interested in the process of how our brains learn. And through that, got into how our brains learn languages in particular. And what struck me about it was that it's kind of a fundamental human thing to learn languages. It's actually our defining trait. And although it's culturally in UK, US, quite common for people to say, I'm bad at languages, I don't have the language gene. If you're a human, you're good at languages. It's like being a fish, you can swim. And what I discovered was, or the theory I came up with while I was studying at Oxford, was that my brain wasn't actually bad at learning languages. It was just bad at learning languages the way I'd been taught it. And so I then went on this journey of trying to discover what actually is the most effective way to learn a language. And it turns out that it's pretty close to what people expect. Go and live in the country, try and communicate with people. You end up learning the language pretty damn quickly. So we got that point quite fast. And then it was about unpicking that. What is it about that experience that actually really creates an effective language learning environment? And so I spent a while unpicking that, and then took back what I learned. I wanted to bring that to a wider audience. So that was the sort of impulse behind Memrise.
And what do you think are the defining characteristics? What is the defining characteristic of learning a language through an immersion experience versus any other version?
You're right. So it's actually refreshingly simple. The only time, and this I didn't invent. This is a very well-established academic fact over 50 years. The only way that you actually gain an ability in a foreign language is by processing target language input at just above your current level. So you have to strain, if you're what you're listening to, you have to strain to understand. That process of your straining to understand, taking a bit of a guess at what they're saying. Is this guy angry with me, or is he trying to make friends? I don't know. With that kind of guesswork is the process of your brain learning. And what happens when you're in an immersion situation is that although lots of the language just floats straight over your head, you don't understand a word they're saying. You attune to the bits that you can make sense of. And there's so much content coming at you, so much speech coming at you, that there is enough that's just above your current level that allows you to keep making progress. Now, that experience is essential whether or not you've learned thousands of words, grammar rules, and everything else. If you do what I did at school, you learn the grammar rules, you learn the words, you can do an exam, but you've never had the experience of processing hours and hours and hours of target language content. And that means I haven't actually acquired the ability. So when you're in an immersion situation, you're just getting a lot of that target language content at the right level. What we've managed to do with Memrise is create it so that although you're not having it all day, all of the content that we show you, all of the media, all of the films you watch, the music videos you listen to, all of that is tuned to be at just above your current level. So we know which words, we help you learn words and phrases. We know which ones you've learned. And therefore we can look at a whole universe of content and say, since you're into cooking, these videos are just above your current level and you'll find them interesting. So it's kind of, we recreate the best parts of an immersive experience of actually being in country, but we actually filter it down so you only get the bits that are useful. You don't get the experience of person shouting you in a foreign language and you've got no idea what they're saying. We make sure that you always have some idea what they're saying, because that's the moment when
so
you're
if I understand
maximizing
correctly, the way the language learning platform works is it basically interviews the student and gets the student, I already know this, I already know this, I don't know this. Like, I mean, how do you identify where the marginal
so you can do
stress
that
is?
through two different ways round. You can start by watching videos and then say, well, there was a video, now you learn the words that were in it. And once you've learned those words, we can then say, oh, now there's probably this other video that you'll know. Or you can start, because people are expecting language learning applications to start with some learning, we can let people start by learning stuff and give them some learning to do first, and then say, now here we can recommend some videos for you. So it can go either way around. It can be fully interest led, or it can be led by some learning, and then you decide, and then you can choose to go and watch something. So that part is what we call the learn and immerse steps. So it's learn some words, then hear them being used in context, and have that experience of processing language at just above your current level. But then there's another crucially important bit, which is actually getting to speak the language. So there's this huge, for adults, there's this huge confidence jump that you need to get over. A lot of people famously get over this by getting drunk and have a few drinks, and you hear people say, well, I always speak Spanish better after I've had a couple of drinks. And it's actually true, because it does, or it can be true, because it does lower the anxiety level, which causes people to be happier about looking dumb and just talking. Whereas when you're in normal life, people get very anxious about looking stupid. And when you're starting to learn a new language, you are like a child. You're going to look stupid. You're going to make mistakes. You're not going to express yourself as you'd like to. And that's really embarrassing, or that can be really embarrassing. And it stops people from taking that step forward. Now, I'm not recommending everyone goes and uses alcohol to try and get over that. That's not a good route. But we can learn from that and understand the problem that we've got to solve. We've got to reduce people's stress. We've got to make them feel more relaxed. And so one of the other things that we've done is building on top of this incredible technology called GPT-3, which is also, I don't know if you've come across Chat GPT recently, where it produces very human-like conversations and text. So over the last couple of years, we've been developing on GPT-3 a conversational AI, where it's like an AI language partner. But you don't have to be embarrassed about talking to it, because it's not a person. It's not going to judge you, but it can help you. It can correct you if you make mistakes. It can talk to you about literally anything. As if you've played with Chat GPT, then you know quite how powerful it is in terms of talking about anything. And so what this means is, and you can voice input to it, and it can speak back to you. So that means that we've gone from a situation where, in order to get practice talking in a language, you really had to find an infinitely patient native speaker who was prepared to tolerate you being quite boring in the language, and also who you didn't feel threatened and judged by. Very difficult thing for most people to come across. But now we've got a technological solution to that, which is this AI language partner, which means you don't have to be embarrassed. You can talk about anything. It'll never get bored of you. You can do it any time of the day or night.
And so you're saying that the GPT functionality, that AI functionality is part of the Memrise platform?
So we have built an AI language partner on top of GPT-3, yes.
Got it. That's now inside of the Memrise platform.
That's now inside of the Memrise platform, exactly.
So my other experience, having middling success learning to various degrees a couple of languages, high school was, it was like Spanish, but I never considered that learning the language. I considered that passing a test. But I did study Japanese, and I did live in Japan, and the most intense language I've ever studied is Japanese. But I'm also in the process right now of learning Italian. And in both cases, I found that it was critical to spend time reading and writing, not just speaking. Because if you
Yeah,
don't see and understand how the words are spelled and how the alphabet is pronounced, I mean, whether it's Italian or Japanese, that it is very challenging. I mean, listen, ordering a coffee, sure, you can do that. But if you actually want to speak a language, I find that reading and writing is fundamental.
well, it can be. I mean, taken to the other extreme, you can see that children learn languages without reading and writing. So it's definitely possible.
But then they're both
But
children learn languages, but then children are taught how to read and write.
I mean, but not all children, and certainly
Well,
not
most
until
people
late
are. I
stages.
mean, listen, if we want to argue about literacy, that's a different conversation.
Right, but is an important one to understand that spoken language is different to written language. Actually, Japanese is a great example of that, where half of the language is written in Chinese characters, and then they've got a phonetic element put on the end of it. They are separate things, but you're absolutely right. It can be hugely helpful to have that detailed understanding of how things are written. And I think there's a lot is said in second language acquisition. People take to an extreme the idea that children learn languages effectively, so we should try and learn languages like children.
Mm-hmm.
Children actually learn languages really slowly. They do literally nothing else for the first 5-6 years of their life. And a 5-year-old speaks the language, but not actually at the same level as an adult, or an adult would be comfortable or would need for business, for example. And so I think that the same argument can be made about grammar, that children don't learn grammar. They don't need to learn it in order to become communicative. But having an understanding of grammar can dramatically speed up an adult's understanding of the structure of the language, and then therefore their progress. And I think the same is true of the written language. It varies hugely between languages. Chinese, for example, I know lots of people who've got fluent in Chinese without being able to read Chinese characters at all. They're such
And I
separate
would just
things.
disagree. I think that to call yourself fluent in a language when you're incapable of sending a simple text message to another, or incapable of reading a simple WhatsApp message, incapable of reading a single street sign. I mean, in Italy, you're not even allowed to get a driver's license unless you can pass
read
a written.
right. So
I think it's ridiculous.
But we could certainly argue about but we can certainly argue what fluency means. The fact that there are native Chinese speakers who can't read, like, are they not fluent? I mean, kind of obviously they are.
They're
but
illiterate.
I agree,
They're illiterate.
Right. So if you're bundling the concept of literacy into fluency,
fair enough.
Which like you can do, like we can divide words however we like. But for a lot of language learners, actually spoken language is overwhelmingly, for tourists, for example, that's the overwhelmingly important thing you want.
And is that who do you think is the user? Because I'm assuming not just your product, but almost every language product is entirely focused on spoken, listening and speaking, not reading. And
No. Actually, not at all. So a lot is writing is probably historically more of what we've done. Listening and writing. Writing is much easier to test than spoken. Yeah. So it's very recently we've been able to, with the advent of the GPT-3 chatbot and what we've built on top of that, to do full conversations. Although speech to text is another layer on top of that, which is separate. So speech is very difficult to do online. So overwhelmingly everything is about writing. And we're trying to push that.
I mean, my experience using Duolingo and my experience using your app is that no one asked me ever to write anything. That the only thing that I'm asked to do is either to click on things that are typed out in front of me, yes or no, or maybe type things.
So on mobile. So typing, are you meaning handwriting rather than typing, or what are you?
Yeah, handwriting.
Right. So handwriting, yeah, we don't do handwriting.
But you
And I
understand
think
the value of handwriting and to learn things
I
versus
think
typing. Anyway,
so.
I don't want to. It doesn't matter. Like
Maybe no. I
you're
actually
the
I
you are
wouldn't.
the ex. I'm just a student, and the point of this is to really understand your business. So I will. I'm not. There's no value in
Yeah.
me arguing with you.
So I think no, but it's worth. So I think for Chinese characters and kanji, stroke order is a great way to learn them. I don't know of any evidence that handwriting for the majority of students now, given that most people are typing everything at school, they're not handwriting stuff. I'm not aware of any evidence that says that that's
Yeah.
better. I think typing versus speaking is an interesting dichotomy, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so, who is your primary customer? Is it people who are tourists that want to be able to order coffee, or is it people that are
Actually,
moving
it's the
to?
full it's the full range because it's
I'm
tuned to
sure it is.
whatever
You
you're
have
interested in.
65
Yeah.
million people, so I'm sure it's everything. But what percentage of this 65 million is people that want to run for president in a foreign, like that want to have the fluency?
The
Like
full
I'm assuming
fluency.
more than half
It's
are people that are tourists, or am I wrong?
yeah. Or actually, so tourists, or actually the real reason that people go recreationally to learn languages is for cultural interest. So, for example, you see that Korean is more than 5 times as popular as Chinese.
Okay.
And the reason for that is that K-pop, Korean soaps are a huge cultural phenomenon in a way that modern Chinese culture has just not crossed over to the Western consciousness at all. And so you see a lot of people learning Korean, not so many people learning
Chinese.
Chinese. And Japanese is somewhere in between, interestingly.
Mm-hmm.
Japanese,
What's
10
the
years
most
ago,
popular?
Japanese was um, right. I mean, English overall is
Okay.
the most popular single language. Then Spanish. Um, Again, if you split out Mexican Spanish or Latin American Spanish from European Spanish, then it's probably second. French is right up there, and then Korean is very high.
Really?
Yeah, it's really the last 5-6 years. So it's kind of 10 years ago, Japanese was very popular. Chinese started growing in popularity, but then never really caught up. And then
Mm-hmm.
Korean has really become very, very popular in the last 5-6 years.
And then what's your business model? How does the company make money?
So through subscription, and
Okay.
you can learn. So you can learn a huge amount on Memrise for free. You could just carry on using it forever for free. But and there's some content there that can take you, through to exam level if you want to. But then we have further features and more content that's available for a subscription.
So, for instance, like the AI interaction, the chat,
You can do a little bit.
is
Do
that
a
a
little bit for
subscription?
free,
Really?
a little bit for free, and then more for paid. Yeah.
Okay. And why do you think? I mean, listen, we've been all learning languages one way or the other for a long time now. Why do you think it has taken us this long to get to a place where the teaching techniques are more in alignment with how the brain is structured, going back to your original point, as opposed to through
Yeah.
the
So it's
exam?
actually there's a second language acquisition academic called Stephen Krashen who, I think it was 1982, he wrote a book called The Natural Approach, and in that he talks about the traditional way of learning languages, which is to live near someone who speaks another language and want to speak to them. And that's the way people have learned languages for most of human history. And indeed, the way most people still learn languages today, if you look across Southeast Asia, Africa, all of these places, indigenous communities, people are learning multiple languages. But where we get to the Western countries, we get to US, UK, we get monoglots. People who only speak one language starts to become a really big thing. And then we've started in school teaching languages to exams. And we create exams to say whether they speak the language, and then we teach them to the exam to pass the
We've
language.
all, I mean, but why do you think it
And
started in that way? Why is it just because the
I
really
think
the
I think it's because the school system wants to be able to judge, can someone speak? And then as soon as you put an exam in, which is a very imperfect way of judging if someone can speak a language, you start teaching to the exam. And then you create these whole methods of teaching that just get success in the exam. And you don't look at the ways that, it's a depressing fact for English teachers of the world that if you look around the world at what predicts whether citizens of a particular country are going to speak English well, and it's nothing to do with the syllabus, it's nothing to do with the school system, it's whether they dub or subtitle American TV that they show in their country. Mm-hmm. And if they dub Friends, no one speaks English. If they subtitle Friends, everyone speaks English. And what that says is, if all those English teachers had just spent their time saying, "Hey guys, should we just watch Friends again?" they would actually get a better result.
When I lived in Japan, I would watch the Blues Brothers movie over and over, but it was dubbed in Japanese, but it had English subtitles.
Yeah, and that's a great way. That's a great way to start. Yeah,
it was very helpful.
But seriously, that has been shown to be the most powerful really? English acquisition tool globally, and I think that we're just now getting back to a place where we can create these sort of virtual immersive experiences. The technology is caught up. GPT-3 is brand new. The ability to stream videos on mobile is relatively new. Last 5 years, really, we've been able to do that to a high level. Both of those technologies are essential to being able to create this kind of online immersive experiences. Mm-hmm. So I think it's because the technology has now unlocked this possibility, we can now create a different kind of learning experience. And I think that we'll see this more and more, that people will then learn genuinely for pleasure. And then when they go on holiday to Italy, you can already talk the language rather than it having to be, God, I'm going to need to actually go and live in Italy for a few months in order to get my language up to mm-hmm. scratch. Which is what I had to do when I was learning Chinese. I had to go and live in a remote corner of China and see if I could work out how to learn the language.
Mm-hmm. And is there a distinction with how someone between languages? In other words, the way someone learns one language versus another language, is it a universal from a brain standpoint?
I mean, from a brain standpoint, from a child, it's pretty much the same in terms of the brain. It's a universal. But once you've learned one language, you've then got a home base. And then every other language is going to be in some way inevitably related back to that. Mm-hmm. So, when you were learning Japanese, there were very few words you get for free in Japanese. If you're learning Spanish...
I'll tell you something interesting. Japanese, obviously, vastly the most challenging thing that was the most challenging language thing I've ever had to deal with by far. But because it has literally no similarity, I mean, it's from zero, basically, other than the fact that you use your mouth to make sounds. But after that, because all the characters, even if you don't even use the kanji, if all you do is use the hiragana and the katakana, if you just use their phonetic alphabets, it's still nothing. It's all scribbles. It might as well be artwork. But I ultimately found that in some ways to be easier than Italian or some of the other languages, because with Italian or the other languages, I'm inclined to fall back into my English and use English words or use English pronunciations, or, I fall back into it because it's the same letters. Whereas with Japanese.
Right. So I think you've also stumbled on the other point there, is that it's also a personality thing of the way that you want to do, the way that you consider yourself to be making progress is really, really important. Mm. And for a lot of people, it's hugely helpful to be able to speak in a mixture of language. And there's a whole technique about weaving in target language with English and just gradually replacing words is a whole technique. Mm-hmm. So for some people, that feels really great to be able to fall back. And there is doubtless the fact that in Spanish, there's a very simple way for a lot of words of just changing the English word to a Spanish word. Same with French. That's a huge benefit and clearly makes it faster in a lot of ways, although it can make it you have false friends, and it can make it trickier as well. So there are rules of thumb about how long it would take a native English speaker to get really competent at different languages. There's also, as you alluded to earlier, the difference in written language, that if I'm going to be using Mandarin for most business reasons, I need to read and write. And I'm not reading and writing without a couple of years of constant effort. That's just the amount of time it takes. So I could get fluent in speaking. I was able to set up a business after living in China for about 8 months, speaking the language, but I then had to do a lot of work to be able to read all the contracts and understand them.
Yeah. And so I guess my last question is, obviously your business has grown tremendously over the last 12 years. Has the overall market for language study grown as well?
Yeah, great question. It's very hard to, so if we separate out, the market for online language study has certainly grown enormously, right? No question. The market for language study overall, I've never got very good statistics on. I suspect it hasn't changed very much. I think it's quite consistent in terms of the people are traveling the world. People need to speak other languages, and particularly people need to learn English. Is just such a hugely powerful economic force in the world, and I don't think that's meaningfully changed.
Right. So you would attribute the growth in your business, obviously, first and foremost, to the technology, technique, and insight, but also the massive migration online over the last decade at the same time.
Yeah, for sure. That was a step, and particularly to mobile.
Got it. And so, what's the next step for this business? What's your unfulfilled ambition at this point with that company?
Yeah, great question. So we have this technology for taking any piece of content and turning it into a language lesson. So any film in Italian, any music video, any cooking video, and then also giving you a way to practice that. And what I'm excited by over the next couple of years is how we turn that from quite a large amount of content, which is what we have at the moment, to literally a way to experience the whole universe of content on the internet. Yeah, anything that you see on TikTok, anything that you see on YouTube, so that we can really turn whole of the media resources that are on the internet immediately into language learning resources without having to do anything extra. It's just like a language learning layer that you can place over the whole internet, and it just turns it into a language learning resource. Because I think that is what will meaningfully change access to acquiring other languages.
And do you think that's going to happen? Do you think that's a certainty? Do you think that's a possibility? How confident are you?
I think that has become a possibility due to the technological changes, and I think that is a technology that we are now catalyzing through what we've built. So I think we are seeing that change already, and I think we'll see that change accelerating over the coming years. I don't think it was inevitable. Like any sort of step change as a result of technology, it's not inevitable. Someone has to invent something that stitches together the potential change with the market demand and works out how to link those two things together. And I think that's what we've done here, and just bringing that to full fruition is really the remaining ambition.
And so it would be the memorize layer of the internet, so to speak.
You could certainly think of it that way, yeah.
That'd be awesome. No one's pulled that off. I mean, I guess Google probably came the closest to layering the internet, or maybe faced some of these walled gardens. But the language layer would be amazing.
Yeah, well, that's what we're bringing about.
All right. Ben Whatley, the company is Memrise. I was using it earlier today. Very, very easy to use and enjoyable. I liked it. This is Tasty Live. I'm Dylan Radigan. You are watching Bootstrapping, and we are back right after this.